solemn occasion. We need to remember what happened. There are people who do not believe that there was assault on the Capitol. There are people who are not interested in making changes to try to protect our democracy. What I would like to do at this point is to thank everybody who's come out, and likewise I would like to give special recognition to two people who have agreed to be our speakers today. I mentioned earlier when we were up at the headquarters that those of us who were in the military at least have taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution. That does not expire. We have two speakers today that have special qualifications to address the issues and concern here. Both are retired judges. Both of them served in uniform. One, served in a special capacity back during Vietnam as a special forces advisor to the Vietnamese Marines. I happen to have been offered the opportunity to be a special advisor to the Vietnamese SEALs. And one of the brighter things I did in my young life was to say, I don't think I'm ready to do that. So I wound up taking a different path on aircraft carrier. But somebody who is chosen for a position like that has basically already at a very young age taken on a special trust. Wallace Wyatt, Brooklyn Judge, St. Clair County, likewise, for the uniform for 15 years.
Well, I'm delighted to be here today. Very delighted to be here today with this group and to remember the important things of this time. I encourage anyone who needs more information, Google January 6th Committee, and you can get all the information you need from that committee. Everybody's watching the news very carefully right now and selecting the Speaker of the House, there's so many good people that it's amazing that it's being so difficult to find anyone who can get that election over with. When I was in Washington D.C. for my last tenure of service, I was going around with the Librarian of Congress to select the new quarters for a new court that Congress had just created, and I was selected to be the chief judge of it. And as I was going around that historic Jefferson building with the librarian, trying to decide where we would house this new court, I told him that it was very important to me to be able to look out the windows from my office and to look into the windows of Hugo Black's chambers. And so I was able to get that, and every day working there in Washington and looking over at Hugo Black's chambers inspired me in my public service there. The Librarian of Congress was a bit amused by my what I thought was important, but as it turned out, after I got settled in there a little bit, I was right near the offices of Cardinal McCarrick, and some of you may recognize that name. Cardinal McCarrick was one of the most used non-member of the State Department for diplomacy all around the world, because he knew the religious leaders of people all around the world. And every day I would have some time to spend with Cardinal and learn from him. Sadly, after I left Washington, I learned that Cardinal McCarrick was involved in abusing young people and was defrocked. And his wonderful reputation was ruined from that hidden part of his time. But before I went to Washington, I had the pleasure of being in this building. And one of the pleasures of being in this building was to be across the hall from Sheila Gilbert and be able to learn from her, and we've been friends ever since, and that was a great part of it. But when I went to the information that's available on the January 6th committee, I was reading some of the testimonies that the committee got. Ronald Sandlin testified that he joined the January 6th insurrection in order to support President Trump. He was following the instructions of his president and his commander-in-chief. John Douglas Wright brought busloads of people to D.C. because President Trump told him to. And he told him to bring those people to support him, and he told his followers that it would be wild in Washington, D.C. Stephen Ayers said he came in order to join a civil war if Trump did not stay in power after January 6th. Hundreds of similar testimonies were taken by the committee. White House staff told of many people, both in government and out, of the attempts to persuade President Trump to send reinforcements and to tell the mob to leave and go home. He refused and tweeted threats to Vice President Pence, putting his life in jeopardy. One testimony that impressed me the most was one that felt familiar to me. It was testimony by Grayton Young, who testified on October 22, 2022. He testified during court in the D.C. Federal District Court that he was convicted of sedition and that he was ashamed. He said he was part of the leadership of the Oath Keepers militia group, and he thought he was there to attack Congress, just like the French people attacked the Bastille and started the French revolutions. He wanted to be part of a critical part of American history. His family had a long military history, and he wanted to keep that history and legacy going. Now he was ashamed and felt that he had embarrassed his family legacy. I'll share with you why that testimony so impressed me. His desire to be part of patriotic action and to serve his country sounds familiar to all Vietnam combat veterans. I graduated from Auburn and was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Army in 1969. Out of a very large class of ROTC students in that year, there were 2 of us who were accepted into military intelligence. I was sent to Tank Commander School, Military Intelligence School, Jungle Survival School, and most importantly, language training to be fluent in Vietnamese, both in the language and in the culture. Surprisingly, I was offered an alternative to those schools that I went to. I could have gone to San Francisco to school for 8 years and being given a graduate degree at the end of that time. I could have been trained in any language I chose in the world and graduate from that program as a major in the Army and to serve in embassies around the world. Instead, I thought that my family legacy steered me to volunteer to go to Vietnam and support my country in helping the Vietnamese people fight communism. Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson told our country that this was important. Robert McNamara and General Westmoreland supplied frequent reports of how important it was for the United States to save the Vietnamese people. Years later, we learned that all of that was lies. All of it was false. America invaded Vietnam as an imperial country, taking its resources and killing its country and its culture and its people. The only beneficiary of our invasion was the military-industrial complex and the armaments manufacturers. 57,000 Americans, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese, and generations of future Vietnamese yet to be born will die from the saturation of Agent Orange in that country. Vietnam veterans still suffer from their actions in Vietnam, as well as physical injuries, mental injuries, and guilt. In Vietnam, I served as an advisor to Vietnamese Special Operations Forces in the Delta. President Nixon had withdrawn American military units from the Delta, so the advisor served under the command of CIA. It was the only time in American history that military forces were commanded by civilians. I pray it never happens again. CIA does not share the standards of the Geneva Convention that is followed by the military. And should never be allowed to command military again. If you want to learn more about this part of our American history, I recommend Neil Sheehan's book, A Bright Shining Light. So why did I digress so far to tell you about my military experiences? Because I volunteered to serve in Vietnam, because the government told me it needed me to go there, because my country needed me there. I went to serve my country. Creighton Young, who I mentioned a moment ago, went to the Capitol to join the insurrection because his president told him his country needed him to do it. And that was true of many insurrections. Those similarities are too close to me. Could I be prosecuted for following orders horribly wrong and came from leaders who knew that they were lying? My experience makes me empathize with many of these misled people who thought they were being patriotic. Were they at fault, or were they misled by the president and government officials who lied to them? I'm not sure. I am sure that the president and his enablers who lied to the American people are responsible, and they should be held responsible and accountable. I think it's a terrible stain on our country that Secretary McNamara and General Westmoreland were not tried for their war crimes. And perhaps by extension, the presidents who followed their leadership and lied to the American people and led to the atrocities that happened in Vietnam. Those two situations to me are awfully similar. And that's why I think more thought needs to be put into and considerations into how much prosecution and how much responsibility and penalty those people that were there should be held to. I thank you for being here, and I thank you for letting me share with you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd say this is the first time I've ever been on the program with a federal judge. I'm quite fine. It's always good to see him. Of course, we're here today on the second anniversary of the January the 6th riot in Washington. Now you say it was a riot, well it was a riot. And we don't ever want to forget it either. You know, as a probate judge in St. Clair County, I conducted many elections in 20 years. I was a probate judge for 20 years, and I conducted 35 to 40 elections. And I assure you, I have yet to figure out how that even one vote could be stolen. I've not figured out how that could be done, because it can't be done. It's basically impossible. But one thing I wanted to mention, of course, I'm glad to be here in Gallagher County. It's probably my favorite county besides St. Clair County. But anytime we hear the words United States, the first thing we're supposed to think about is elections. That's what we're about here in this country. We have the privilege, we have the freedom, we have the some of the people I want to mention are election officials, not just here in Alabama, but I'm talking about election officials all over the whole country. And we used to call them poll workers, but we tried to upgrade a little bit. We call them election officials now. And these folks are basically volunteers who work for not very much pay, and we could not have elections. We couldn't function in this country if it were not for these people who are, like I say, mostly volunteers, but on account of January the 6th and the so-called big lie that the election was stolen, it has casted doubt on these people, so that some of them are dishonest. So I want to assure you that our elections are honest and valid. And the only thing you have to do is just make sure you're resting the vote, so that when election day comes along, you can go and cast your ballot. And you know, you've heard the saying, we all like to say this, if you don't vote, you can't gripe. And I normally am, and I like to gripe, so I will be sure and go vote whenever I. But these people, these election officials are patriots, is what I call them, patriots. They're great citizens of this country. They're like the best citizens, the people who go about in the community, helping others, doing good for people, and never expecting or asking for anything in return. They just do it because they're good citizens. And I believe that God blesses that behavior. And so that's about Miss Sheila. That's about most of what I have to say today. And it's been a pleasure. I sure have enjoyed associating with everybody today. And I look forward to coming back.
Jim, turn this way. Turn this way.
Thank you very much for coming out this afternoon. This is a very important occasion. I was distressed when I signed up to organize this event. That this, to the best of my knowledge, is the only event of this type in Alabama or Georgia, which strikes me as incredible. But we had participation from people as far away as Atlanta, Birmingham. We had people sign up from Selma, as well as locally. One of the things that has come out of the January 6th committee is a series of 11 recommendations of how to protect our democracy going forward. One of the things that I would particularly like to highlight, in light of what Judge Wyatt said, is protection of election workers. One of the things that was very, very clear in the testimony before the January 6th committee was the amount of harassment and intimidation that had occurred to individual election workers. To the point where during this last election in November, some places had a great amount of difficulty getting enough poll workers to be able to conduct the elections. That is a shame. And the other thing is, as Judge Fletch mentioned, drawing his parallels of his experience in the insurrectionists, there are a huge number, a huge proportion of our population are at heart patriots. I have spent time during my Navy career in different parts of the world where getting public office is about how I can enrich myself and my friends and family. One of the things that was always a source of pride to me in going to those different parts of the world and coming back here and things like teaching at the Army War College was that this nation has a tradition of public service. And one of the tenets of that is selfless service. It's not about me, it's about we. It's about what's good for all of us. And unfortunately, one of the things that's a backdrop to the January 6th events and that we're still dealing with is a number of people who were systematically lied to about what the situation was, what the purposes were, and what the consequences of that are. So this is one day of rally in recognition of what happened 2 years ago and trying to encourage people to be active going forward and also not to forget what did happen and why it is important for all of us to back fair elections, back our election officials, and challenge those people who will systematically lie to us in such a way that it thrusts into doubt the very democracy that is the bedrock of our nation. I thank you all very much for coming out. Those of you who want, please retire back to our starting point and sign postcards or whatever. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming and have a great day.
Hey, let me just do a picture of all that.